Yep, there we go. So the internet is active. Okay. So what we'll talk about today is another topic that should be covered in other programming classes. So we'll talk about subroutines and how we can return a value from a subroutine if there's only one thing to return. We'll talk about parameters. We'll talk about list parameters to be more specific. What makes lists kind of different is what we call passing by reference versus passing by value. I'll show you guys the concept as we get there. And if we have time, we'll talk about how to deep copy a list. So we'll get there when we talk about those very specific topics. So we'll start with simple stuff like return values and also parameters. Okay. And some of these or most of these concepts should be not in JavaScript, but it's not really that much different between App Inventor and JavaScript, at least as far as these particular topics are concerned. So I'm going to call this new project params, okay? Because all it does is to deal with parameters. And to specify some input and to get some output, I'm going to have two list boxes as input and then one button as the trigger to perform the operation. So we got what? The text box?
I figure this out all weekend. I can't get list view to do anything I want it to.
What do you want it to do?
I want to be able to click on it and then update it.
Click on list view and update itself?
Item, yeah.
Okay.
Which I think you can do it, but you have to pull the entire list array and then find out the index number and then update the single one and bring a pop-up that asks for what you want it to change it to.
Yes.
Which I couldn't figure out how to do pop-ups anymore. And I know it's
Pop-ups.
or like an entry box.
Like a drop down?
Notifier? Is it that one? It is under Notifier.
Notify can do a few things. So do you want to just display a message on the screen, or do you want to?
No, so you're gonna throw a list view on there, right?
Well, okay. So instead of talking about this, we can talk about
No, I don't want
that.
to talk about my stuff.
No, that's good. Because it's still related to this class, right? This is actually more. What I'm going to talk about is more advanced than just the user interface. So yeah, so let's switch gear and talk about the list box then. So we'll start a new project just for that. Okay. So tell me what. Okay. So for the rest. So for the rest of the class, we'll talk. We have to explain what this is, what the problem is with the rest of the class. So are you using a list view or a list picker?
List view.
A list view. Okay. Well.
List picker is like a drop-down menu essentially.
Yep.
List view is like a list.
It's always there. It's always expanded. You can see all the items in the list, as opposed to.
Maybe I'm misusing it. Probably am.
Well, okay. So the first thing we do, whenever we learn how to use something, is to go to the help page, and it says right here, a list view is a visual component or visible component that allows to place a list of text elements. So it can only have text elements, which is a pretty big limitation considering proper Android programming using Java allows you to put just about anything inside a list box. But in this case, it's only a text element. On the screen to display, the list can be set using elements from string property. In other words, you can give it a string that is comma separated, and it will automatically break up the items and create the list for you. Or you can use the elements block in the blocks editor. Warning, this element will not work correctly on screens that are scrollable. So you have to make sure that your screen is not scrollable in order to get this to work. Okay, so it's got a few properties. Has no it has no event to handle. As far as we can see, maybe scrolling down there will be some. Yeah. So we got background colors, elements, which is a list of text elements to build your list. So this is only for building the list. Once your list is built, this particular property may not be that useful anymore. In other words, if you update this particular list, it may not update what is actually displayed. That's what I'm thinking. Elements from string builds basically doing the same thing, except one is a list to begin with, the other one is a string that is comma separated. Height selection. So this is useful because it tells you which one of the item in a list view is selected. So you don't have any problem using the selection rate. Selection or selection index. One returns the text, the other one returns the number of the item in the list. So that's the only difference between these two. Show filter bar. It allows you to search, if you have a lot of stuff in your list. This allows you to set up a filter so that you can allow people to type in something like a partial string, partial match, and it will only show what is matching that particular criterion. Text color, pretty obvious. Visible, width, pretty obvious too. And then the events, there's only one event, which is after picking. In other words, if a end user clicks on one of the items inside a list view, then that event gets triggered. Then you can go to selection or selection index to know which one has been selected. So are we good so far? So if I understand correctly, you want to change one of the items in the list view.
That was the idea, yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and do this. So what we'll do is we are going to keep counters inside list view. When you click on one, it will up that counter by 1. Is that okay? So that will involve knowing which one is clicked. It will involve knowing what is the current number and up the number and then update the list itself. So we'll figure out how to do that. Okay. So are we doing okay so far with this? All right, cool. So let's do this. All right, so we have a list view here, and you can control the height of the list view, which by default is auto, if I remember correctly. Yep, okay. So we'll just keep it the way it is. Question? No? Okay. And we'll go ahead and initialize it with like 4 numbers. So we go to list view. Oh, actually, we need to go to screen 1 because it's part of the initialization in order to do this. So we go to initialize right here. And then what we do is we go to list view, and we set its elements to a particular list. And that list, we construct the list here from make a list. And we'll just kind of brute force this and specify 4 items in the list. And each one is just a number starting with 0. There we go. And then we just duplicate these, oops, a few times. Uh-oh, nope. I do not. Control D, nope. Okay, wrong user interface. This one does not take Control D for duplicate. Okay, there we go. And we'll call this our first revision of the program because we just want to make sure that we can now display a list view that has exactly 4 items, and then each item is a number starting from 0. That's all we want to check at this point.
Huh? With text?
Yeah, you can.
4 different statements?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Okay, so now we'll build the APK. So in this class, I don't bother to do the kind of more interactive way of debugging. I always just kind of download the APK just because I got a device here already, and this is the only way to debug a multi-screen application anyway. So if your application has multiple screens, you can't really use the more interactive way of uploading your program and debugging your program. So this is kind of the only way to do it, which is a little bit cumbersome, but once you get the process down, it's not too bad. All right, so we'll get the command line box up here. And I need several tabs because one needs to display the screen of the of my laptop, mobile device. Okay. Server error. Okay, so this one. And then we'll use the other one to run the actual command line, which is going to the Android SDK platform tools. And then we'll do adb install-r. And this time it is listbox.apk. What?
Kids.
What is that?
Pacifier.
Pacifier.
Just found it in my bag.
Does it actually pacify?
One of my kids, yeah. Just chewed the shit out of it though. Actually ripped it in half almost.
Well, it's good to know that at least it works. For one kid at least.
The other kid's too old for a pacifier at this point.
One kid at a time. I think at some point they will put electronics inside these pacifiers, so it can like shake, with different frequencies. So when you chew on, it's like zzz, like that, zzz, like that.
Why would you want that?
Because people would do some studies and find that pacifiers that actually shakes or vibrates at a certain frequency, has more pacifying, effect and whatnot.
Okay.
Kind of like a rocking cradle.
Yeah, self-rocking cradles. Those are like you have to install like batteries and
They have self-rocking.
Yeah, they don't really work.
they don't work.
Kids want to torture you. They're like, you rock me, damn it.
What?
I'm not gonna accept this.
That's only if your kids like you, right? They're basically saying, "Dad, you rock."
Yeah. I wish I rocked
But since they couldn't quite say those words, they just scream at you and go like, "Please, Daddy, you rock the cradle, please." Close enough.
Shit's getting heavy now too.
Okay, so we got it. The numbers are kind of small, right? You get the zero that are kind of small.
Oh, there's
And I can do the selection thing, but nothing is really happening. Oh, if you cannot see the zeros, they're really small, like
Oh,
here.
okay.
Those are the buttons. They are tiny. Okay, so we can fix that.
That's cool. You can select each one, and that's how you make the event.
Yep. Yep. So we're gonna change. Well, we can customize, right? Well, because you can customize this and change hopefully font size. And this is already font size 22, which is really weird. So we'll try to double that to 44. Okay. But we're not going to just like make one change in this case. We'll go ahead and make several changes at the same time. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to select an item, and then we'll go ahead and report back what is selected. So I'm going to use a notifier to help us understand what is being selected. Okay, so we go back to blocks, we go to list view 1 and take its only event handler, which is saying, okay, something is clicked on this thing, or something is picked, right? So what we'll do is we're going to display, using the notifier 1, and we're going to notify using, I personally really like show alert because it doesn't pop up a box. It's just it's a quick message. It appears on the screen and it goes away. Now, obviously, you don't want to display something that is a whole long paragraph when people don't have enough time to read the whole thing and it fades away by itself, right? But if a simple message like, blah, blah is selected, hey, it's pretty useful for that purpose, okay? So I'm going to do it that way.
Notifier would be the same place where you ask for an input, right?
Yes, so you can, there's one particular call with a notifier that can ask the end user for something using a pop-up dialog box. So if that is something that you want to do, you can use a notifier for that too. But the answer doesn't come back until you get the event of after text import or something like that. So so it's going to be broken up into a few pieces. You have to do that with a text box anyway, so it's not much different from that. All right, so we'll show the notice of being a string. So we pick up a text, but we're going to do a join here, which means the first part is a prompt that I can specify, and we'll go ahead and specify in selected index, index is, okay. And then the second one is the actual index being selected. So we go back to list view 1, and then we go to selection index instead of selection. So what you have to remember, or what you need to differentiate, is selection is the text of whatever you have selected, and it's going to be the same for all 4. Okay, so there's no way I can tell which one. But if you use selection index, then it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I can tell exactly which one is being selected. Okay, so we'll go ahead and use selection index here. Pick this thing, put it here, and we call this our second revision of the program. So you can see how each time I'm only testing a very simple function, because until I can test and make sure that we can do something like this, it doesn't make any sense to go any further forward, because we don't know whether we can rely on this mechanism or not. And this is something that I try to emphasize in all of my classes, not only for this one, is to test your program often. Change a little bit, add something. You have a theory of how it's supposed to operate, but you should test it first before you really go forward and go like, assuming this works, right? Make no assumptions. The only kind of bad thing about App Inventor is it's not easy to do revision control. In other words, you can't use GitHub or something like that easily to help you, kind of keep track of all the revisions of your program. You can use a built-in function here. If you go to projects, you can see how you can do a checkpoint. So what checkpoint does is it will save your current project under a different name while continuing to work on the original. So it's kind of like a backup in a way, okay? So if you have done up to a certain point of your project and go like, this is all working, it's all good, but I'm going to make some changes that may break it, then you might want to save a checkpoint just in case the program stops working and it's impossible to find out why it's not working anymore. Then you can go back to an earlier checkpoint and continue from that point. So it's just a little convenience feature. You can definitely do the same thing with other ways to do it too. The other way to also back up your project is to use export. So this is also a good way to back up your project. It will back it up in the form of being able to download a file onto your local computer. So this way, if your Google account goes bad or something really bad happens, then you still have a local copy of your project. You're not relying on cloud storage, in this case, to store your project. Okay, so that's another way to back up something. And I would strongly suggest that if you use this feature to download a snapshot of your project, you want to name your project kind of in a unique way. In my case, I just append with the year, month, day, and then the time, like hour and minute. So this way I know exactly when that project was saved. So if I save multiple one of those, I know when I saved each one. Because the worst thing to do is to save multiple versions all over the place and you have no idea which one is the most recent one. All right, so I think we are ready to run it again. Oh, this is the other part. I need to talk about it, but later. Okay, switch back to here, reinstall. Okay, and then go back to here. All right, so we're back to list box, and this time you can see how the zeros are bigger. That's 44, okay? 44 point font. Okay, I click on one, it says index is 1, index is 2, index is 3, and index is 4. So this is good, okay? We can get to the indexes. So here comes the next part. The next part is what you want to do, which is, depending on which one is selected, I want to, change that counter and, increment the counter by 1. In other words, if I click on the second one, that 0 will become a 1. That's what I want to do. So does that resemble what you were trying to do with your project?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
so
Okay, all right. All right, so we'll go ahead and do it. All right. So I'm going to add more code, within the AfterPicking event handler, because that's where I know, which one is updated. Okay, I can keep the show alert, it doesn't hurt anything. The only thing I would change is, put a space after the is, okay, because, right now it's kind of smooshing the is and the number together. And then we can do some changes, okay? So the laziest way I can think of is to go back to the list and just change the second item of the list and up that counter by 1 and see whether it updates, right? So I'm guessing that is not going to work, but we'll give it a try. Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right. So we'll go to list view 1, and it has, let's see here, go back up a little bit. So it has, elements. You can get the elements back, and you can, set element 2. So what we'll do is we're gonna click on this block here, because eventually, this is the kind of bad thing about App Inventor is the way we specify the blocks, as far as connecting it to the existing blocks is concerned, is backwards. You start with the last operation and then move backwards to the first operation that you want to perform. So that requires a little bit of different way of thinking, because most people will think with, okay, what is the first step? What is the second step? What is the third step? But in App Inventor programming, the way the blocks are designed is kind of backwards. Oh, you just want to type.
I don't know why.
Typing code and opening docs.
I made a
Is that what it is? I don't know what it is.
I made a poster once with a big cat face on it. And then on the top it has got really big, huge text saying "got mice." It's a cat saying "got mice," kind of like the "got milk" commercial, except it's "got mice," right? But underneath it has a very small fine print that says real programmers use keyboards.
Like that one.
So it's not what you expect. It's totally different. Totally has nothing to do with cats. Yep. Anyway. Okay, so we're going to go to list here and find out what we can do with list. Because if we can just find and change one item, that would be perfect, right? And I think it has a way to do it. Replace list item, change the index blah 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 to a replacement. So it actually is capable of doing that, except it does not return a list, okay? So I'm not really sure whether it can take the list from as a property. I don't think it can do it that way. So we can use a local variable, just kind of move things around a little bit. So we now have to go to variables, and then we just need a, oh, we can use this one. Okay, so we can use this one because this local variable block actually has a way to specify a local variable. So we're just going to set this one, call this a list, and we'll set that to the list view one's elements. There we go. All right. So now within that block, we still have to specify a general block that performs some operation and returns a value. So let's see. I think it's under control. We can do something like that. Yeah, do result. Yep. So let me see if there's a better way, easier way. I think this may be the only way or the easiest way to do it. Okay, so now we can specify an operation, and then we specify the result. And the result is going to be just the local variable list itself. So we're going to do some work with that one and then return it. And then what we're going to do here is to go back to lists and specify that replace item with something. Okay. And this list now is going to be my local variable list. And the index is based on my selection index. So I just make a copy of this and stash it over here. And then the replacement is whatever it is plus 1, okay? So there are a few ways to do this. I'm going to give you a loose, but it's not exactly the best way to do it, but it will get a job done kind of thing. Okay, so we'll say, because at this point I can use just selection. Because selection, remember, is the content of whatever is in the box. And that is basically what we need. So instead of indexing into the list to find out what the current value is, the selection already has that.
Text.
But it's text. But this is App Inventor, just like any scripting language. If you use text within a context of numerical calculation, it will automatically cast it into a number first before it performs the operation, which is a big deviation or difference between from a strongly typed programming language like Java or C++. And we want to add 1 to it, like so. Okay. And then this block is now useless. Oh, okay. Let me see, can I just delete one block? Yes. There we go. Right click first and find out what you can do with the block.
So, but you had to put it right on the block you want to delete when you right click.
Correct, yes. All right, so do we have any questions about this after picking at this point? It has got the additional logic to get the elements back first, okay? Change the element that we want to change based on selection index to one more than its current value. And then we give it back to set elements of list view 1 and see if it updates. Is that okay? Right. So if this works, then we'll try to simplify this and only do the replacement on the elements list and see if that works. Okay, but we'll try this method first and see if that works. So we build. Blum, blum, blum. All right, then we re-upload and then retest the program. Okay, yep, that works. Oh, this will be a new Costco counter app. You can now start to differentiate between different customers, right? The customer coming in with a business membership, a normal business membership, or a Visa. What is the Chase? No, not Chase. I cannot remember. Costco is affiliated with a particular bank to do its credit card. So now you can have different counters for each one. Is that? How big is the basket? Come with kids, Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and do one more thing, okay? I'm just curious of, is this the only way to do it, or can I do it in a simpler way? Okay, because I think there's a simpler way to do it, but App Inventor may not actually let me do it that way. So when you have something that's working already, but you're going to test something new, one thing you can do is to right-click on the block, and you just disable the block. In other words, it's kind of equivalent to commenting out, in a normal programming language, where you're not losing the code. You're just saying, okay, let's not do this, but keep it around. Okay. So it's really nice because now I can just insert additional blocks and go like, okay, let's test whether the other way works or not.
What did you do again to do that?
Huh? Right click.
Right click on the block.
Yep, and then say disable. So if you enable it again, then it becomes active again. Question? I thought you had a question.
No, I was thinking about the page where it said it only allows text,
Mm-hmm.
but you can run an operation on it, like it converts it to an integer,
Mm-hmm.
and runs the operation, then puts it back into text and puts it back into the list.
Yep.
Which is useful for pieces that I need to fix, but.
Okay. Yeah.
On that after picking event handler, so
Yeah, it's interesting. It'll like change it and then put it back.
All right, so I'm going to try something, a little bit different this time. It's going to do about the same thing. I would hope that it would do exactly the same thing, but it may not be doable. So this time I'm just going to get a replace list item block here. And then the list that I'm replacing is directly the list view one elements. So now we go to list view one and then get elements.
That's gonna work.
Have you tried it?
You just can't really do much with elements.
Well, we'll see whether this has an implicit set that it would actually that it will utilize to update the screen,
I have tried it.
and it didn't work, right?
I don't think that worked.
Yeah, I have a strong suspicion that this is not going to work because the set block, probably triggers something in addition to changing the list. Yeah, go ahead.
I was asking you, so you're picking that, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to do exactly the same thing, except this is a little bit. It's using a different mechanism to try to do the same thing. So I have a strong suspicion that it does not work, because even though it is supposed to change the list itself, but it's not triggering the set elements, method.
Yeah, I don't think it considers the elements as a list.
Well, it comes back as a list.
Because otherwise that block ahead above it wouldn't have worked.
It wouldn't click. Well, I mean, we can give it a try.
No, you created
There's
though.
no
You initialized
non-index
it. You
version
created
of
it
the
and made it
selection
into a list first.
in the list view one.
Yeah. So that's the actual value in that box at the time.
Implicitly.
You're saying there's no like elements button
I feel like
that's
I've tried
just
it.
for the selection. Oh, list view one selection.
Yeah, selection is basically it's the text of the box that you have clicked on.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so we'll give that a try. This is also one thing that I try to remind students of all of my classes. If you're not sure whether it's going to work or not, give it a try. You're not making code change to the DMV website, live.
Well, then it still wouldn't matter because people are used to those wait times. So
Or making live changes to the control system of a nuclear plant. That you might want to really run some simulations, really test it out first. But for something like this, hey, but you also know what they say. A lot of times mistakes is what makes discovery. Just look at brain science alone. What we understand about the brain, is mostly because of mistakes and accidents. People go into a emergency room with certain type of brain damage, and then they found out, oh, so if you're missing that part of a brain, you cannot do blah blah blah.
The man who mistook his wife for a hat.
Let's try this a few more times.
Yep, doesn't work. So you have to use the other way to do it. This way does not work.
I feel like I tried it.
Yeah, I just thought, give it a try, but it doesn't give me any runtime error either. So what that really is saying is this block here, the set list view elements 2, in addition to actually changing the list, it's also updating the list itself, where the implicit operation that is done in this block here is not doing the same. Well, it's okay. I mean, now we know. So we will re-enable this one.
I'm just curious, would it work if you put set list elements 2 and then just put list view 1 elements?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just to cause it to.
To see whether it is actually updated, and then you just say, okay, let's update it again,
Well,
right?
just to see if that
Oh, okay.
that does work. It's just,
Sure. There are two ways to test that theory. Okay, I agree. That's good to at least to find out. All right, so let's re-enable this one. And the other way to find this out is really just to use another notice and show the entire list and see whether we see the number being incremented in this case. So instead of selection index, we wanted to display selection. Yep, because it can display a list, especially when they're all just numbers. So we don't have any potential issues of whatever the items are contains the comma itself. So this may work, should work. Alrighty. So go back here, update, and then give it another try. So it's 3, and oh, it did not display the list. Huh. It only showed us 0. A single 0, not a list. So it did not see this as a list. That's okay, there's a quick fix to it too. If you go to lists, there's a way to convert a list into a CSV or comma separated string. I think it's close to the end. So we just need to, huh? Oh, list to CSV row. So now we combine these two, and it won't. Come on.
Oh, is selection a list? It shouldn't be
Oh, right. Selection. It's items, elements. There we go. Okay. So my mistake. And then this one should be updated to say the elements are.
Keep going. It's gonna be a long day.
It's not.
Well, I'm just already yawning. I don't know why.
Oh. Oh, you're just feeling that this is a long day already.
Dude, I slept over 8 hours on Saturday night for the first time in years. It was awesome.
Sleep is important. Look up, what lack of sleep can do to your body.
I already know.
You already know.
I can't believe it happened. I mean, it literally. I mean, I've been tracking my sleep every day for over a year,
Uh huh.
and I've not ever even gotten close to 8 hours.
Well, it also depends on the quality of sleep.
It measures that too, but it was all high quality, all the mix of deep sleep with whatever, it was perfect.
Yeah, well,
So good yesterday.
there's one more thing that you need to kind of track, when you're sleeping, and I'll talk about that after we look at this. Yep, it actually changed the list. We just have to have another set to get it, which is kind of counterintuitive, because if you look at the code that way, it's going to be pretty.
I was gonna use what worked.
But there are two more ways to make it work. Which way are you going to choose?
I'm fine with just the one.
Yes.
Never mind. I was gonna say if you replace maybe if you replace the selection list view one selection with elements plus one, and since it picked an index.
You cannot do elements plus one because elements is a list. You have to say which item is getting the
Yeah, I
plus
tried
one.
to Google, is there a way to propagate multiplication across a list?
Nope. Write a loop.
Yeah.
Write a loop.
I was starting to try to do that.
Do a for each.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for each item in the list.
Yep.
So
I
it's
was
just
using that
updating it
yesterday,
visually.
2 days ago, trying to do something, and
That's
Yep.
what I
it
that's
was
what I
going,
started.
Mm-hmm.
giving me an error saying
Yeah.
can't use 0 as an index,
Oh,
which was like, okay, well that makes sense. So I was, but why is item starting at 0? Shouldn't item be starting at the first item of the list?
because your list is empty.
No, it's not empty or anything. It's
Huh.
like
Well, if we can take a look at that code, when we get to the lab. Okay, so getting back to sleep. Okay. With this class size, I can do that. And we really got most of the things covered in this class. I mean, we are just, getting into the projects and helping you guys along with, all the steps here.
I have a
Yes.
question. Is there any way when you create an app with app inventor to create an icon? So like on your phone when you look
Okay.
at it?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Um, okay. Okay, since we were talking about sleep and Android and apps, right? I mean, this actually relates to all of that. Interestingly,
Showed us this thing.
I did.
Yeah, you got one of those.
I got one of those because I had sleep apnea, right? And then after a while, using a CPAP, I don't snore nearly as badly anymore. My wife said, oh, it seems like you're not having sleep apnea anymore. And then I got one of these things for her, because she refused to use her CPAP and go like, okay, you must be having a CPAP is kind of like it's pressurizing air. It can sense whether you're breathing in or out, and it pressurizes air when you're breathing in. So if you have any type of blockage that actually causes sleep apnea, it will push the air through.
Is that mask the Darth
Yeah,
Vader mask people wear?
yeah. I have one of those. I have actually several masks.
Yeah, my friend, he used to have one, carries it around everywhere, and
It's really, really
it's really
helpful.
loud.
Yeah, well, it can be really loud. Depends on the model. So anyway, I put on one of these things, and then I went to sleep. Every single time when I was about to fall asleep, like I was conscious, and then slowly I'm losing it, and then it would buzz me. It's like, come on, I'm trying to sleep here. Stop buzzing me, and then I'll do it again, and then buzz me again. So as it turns out, it has an alarm. If your blood oxygen saturation drops below 95%, it will buzz you because the normal range of blood oxygen saturation is between 95% and 100%. Anywhere below 90% is considered kind of bad, and if it's below 80%, you can actually have tissue damage. Okay, yeah. So I was going like, okay, I'm going to turn that feature off. Except you can't really turn it off, so I turned it all the way down to 80%, and then I slept fine. But this thing, actually has an internal log, which means you don't need a mobile device, next to it, to do the logging. So the next day, I went back to look at the log, and it logged that my blood oxygen saturation dropped all the way down to like 82%,
Wow.
which is considered really, really, really
So you're
bad.
almost dead.
Yep.
Brain damage.
Blue, actually, they say there's a certain medical condition where people's extremities are blue, and that's also because of the lack of oxygen in the blood. And then the next night I put this on again, but this time I put my CPAP on again, and it was fine. Okay, it was good. There were occasional dips to 92%, but for the most part it's like 95, 96%.
So the mask works.
The mask worked, but it also tells you that just looking at a Fitbit, it says that you have enough time of sleeping does not necessarily mean that your sleep is giving you the rest that you need because of the lack of oxygen.
Well, I've been tracking it over a year,
Mm-hmm.
and then writing down how I feel and stuff. So I'm pretty confident
Okay.
and I don't have sleep apnea.
Or I did not know either.
Well, you have a mask.
I did not know either. I had to go to Kaiser to do a to go to the sleep lab, and they give you a machine to wire you up. So you have to do all the wiring, right? So there's an oximeter, kind of like that thing. It would put some electrodes on your chest, so they can actually detect whether you're breathing or not. It has a sound sensor next to you, and so on. So it's only through that test that I found out that I had sleep apnea.
Do the test though.
Huh?
What made them decide to do the test?
My wife said that I had gasping noises when I slept. It's like, I would sleep, and then suddenly there's no breathing for like 15, 20 seconds,
That's common.
and then it's like, like that. But I could not remember. I could not remember because I was actually sleeping at the time. But it wakes your sleep cycle, so you're not actually you could never get into deep sleep this way, because I was doing that like 20, 30, 40 times an hour. So every minute and a half, I would do this, right? So I was never able to get to deep sleep, which is where you need to be in order for your body to start to heal and regenerate. Light sleep has its own purpose too, but it's not. You don't want all your entire sleep to be just light sleep or REM sleep, rapid eye movement. That's REM, REM sleep. So there you go. Okay. So are we Good here? Are we kind of settled? Okay, cool. So the list was actually updated. It's just that it did not update the visible um, component, because we are not using the set um, method within the list view itself. So that was the only problem. All right, cool. Any other issues, when you guys are writing your app? Yes.
Oh no, I was just say so in that block up there where it says replacement list view selection +1 in the commented out block,
Mm-hmm.
that one does update it
This
visually.
one does. Yeah.
Okay.
Now this one would work too if I just put in one extra block here.
Okay.
So if I put in set elements two, and then use get element after that, which doesn't sound logical, but it is how you get it to work. So if I put this block here, and then we also get the elements back like that, it would work.
Yeah. There's just no update.
Yep. So you either use this method or combine these two blocks. I mean, they both would work. It's just which one do you prefer. This one involves the use of a local variable and slightly bigger, and then this method involves two individual blocks. So, but either one works. All right. So cool. Any other questions? Has anyone else run into like specific issues with your app? You want to learn how to use a particular component or technique? Yep.
The TinyDB,
Okay.
trying to get that thing to work, but it's not working properly.
Okay. So how is it not working properly?
Or at least I don't think it's working properly. It's I'm trying to save the list that I have
Mm-hmm.
to it,
Yeah.
and then when you load it, it asks, okay, it's supposed to the way I read it,
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to be able to give you um, kind of like a selection view, and I was taking that selection view. It's not really. It's like it comes back with the name of each item
Mm-hmm.
that has been saved there,
Mm-hmm.
and so what I was doing was I was saving the name for like the D&D character creator. It was the name of the character was going to be the name of the item.
The tag. Uh-huh.
Yeah, the tag. So it's supposed to bring back a list of tags, but it doesn't give any tags, and then I can't make a selection to load something.
So,
Hmm.
so if we just took this example, it'd be like trying to save this list after you increment it and then bring it back, but you named that list on here, you can't bring back the list. Is what you're saying.
Okay. Okay.
Bring
So
it back.
did it give you any
What's
runtime
my
error?
No,
It didn't. Okay.
list?
So it just somehow did not seem to save what you wanted to save.
I'm thinking that's what it's doing. It's just not
Okay.
saving properly.
Well, it's maybe saving, but it's not saving it as a list. So if you look at TinyDB, it is very limited in terms of what it can do. It can only save basically strings.
Yeah, and I make it. I use your
JSON.
get in JSON.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Did you? Okay, so there are a few ways you can check out. Did you try to use get tags to get back a list of all the tags, and it gives you back an empty list?
It doesn't give me anything back.
So it will be an empty list.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then when I store the value, the text tag is just the name that is found on the list that I'm trying to save to it. So I go to the index of name
Mm-hmm.
or the key value of name, get the name right after it, put
Mm-hmm.
that as the tag, and then
Mm-hmm.
this value I store is the make JSON
Mm-hmm.
full list.
Hmm. Okay. That one I might need to actually take a look at during the lab time. But that sounds like a kind of interesting issue to resolve because I have never had any real issues with this. Even because once you convert the list to a JSON representation, it's no more than just a string as far as TinyDB is concerned. And yeah, go ahead.
Why don't we just convert that list into a string and name it and
Yeah,
do it
sure.
that way and try to bring up the exact same list, right? Would that be the same thing?
Yeah.
'Cause
Okay,
just
let's
like
do
to see
that.
too. That was way low on my features. I don't know if I'm gonna make it there, but
Okay, so we can easily do that, right? So that means instead of doing this, we're gonna be reading it back from TinyDB if it is found, right? So we go to, oh, okay, I need to include a TinyDB first.
Thing about doing was just doing files, not just go around and just put it all into a file.
No, that's perfect. But I mean, I think this idea is how it should be,
Mm-hmm.
how it should work, right? Like it's a simple enough thing that you want to do.
Okay.
So every time you pull up your character, you choose it, and it's all like
Yeah.
build it right. Yeah.
And I'll need my make JSON back.
Go into your backpack.
Yep, go into my backpack. And click.
God, thank God we didn't have to write this. I hate looking at it.
That's okay, we don't have to look at it. See?
Yeah, exactly.
The problem is when I do that and I set it up like that,
Uh-huh.
I need to make sure I know where exactly I want to put it.
Because it's,
Then it just stays there and you can't move it afterwards. If you click on that, it moves the whole screen. You're going, oh, I guess it's staying there forever.
Yeah,
Oh.
the way this screen moves around and stuff, or is zooming in on, is miserable. Like, if you have a big monitor, it's not as bad. Like, when I'm working on campus, though, with this thing, it's like, I can see 2 blocks. And it always zooms you out automatically, or zooms you in to, like, whatever, and then moves you on its own. I'm like, dude, I can see better than that.
Okay.
I left my glasses at home. Evil.
Okay, so we're gonna do some JSON text decode. So until we get to this block here, it's all gonna be, let me see. Okay, there we go.
Why are you doing
Wrong
like
part, wrong.
initializes?
Because I want to read it back if I do have anything already.
Okay, so it's initializing with nothing, and then when you close it, you're gonna write the JSON to the default, and then when it initializes next time you open it, it'll pull it. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Okay, so there's that. And then we specify the tag. We'll just say counters, okay? So counters is the tag. Did you use any type of special names for the tag, like things with a space or anything like that?
No, it was just, well, it might have space in it.
Okay, so we'll try to replicate it.
Yeah, it's just the name of whatever you gave the name of your
Okay, so we'll say the counters with a space in between.
What's one of the name of your characters? I want to know.
Oh, I didn't make a name. Right now, I just put Boba Fett.
That's what I wanted to know.
It's an autofill because that's the Google account of mine. So it's the autofill. It's just Boba Fett. All right.
Okay. So what this block is going to do right now is it's going to try to it will invoke TinyDB1, get value, and say, do we already have the counter saved? If it has, then it will return that, which is a JSON representation of a list. And then it will go to the JSON text decode it back into a list, and then store that into elements to initialize the list view that way. If TinyDB1 says, nope, there's no such entry in the Tiny database, then it will use the default value, which turns out to be a JSON representation of a list of 4 zeros. So it will retain the functionality like the previous code, except it also has the ability to go back and find out, do we already have an item? So when we exit out of the app and re-enter the app, it will keep the counter values. All right, so that part is done. So now we move on to after picking, and then
The app can only have one recipe. Do I get points for one recipe?
is it one of those universal recipe that can save the world? I think Thanos has that recipe.
Exactly. First get the time stone.
No, you need to first get the gauntlet.
Yeah.
You gotta have the wok before you can stir fry, right?
Oh.
Details.
TinyDB1, and we just want to store value, right? So we put a store value here, and then the tag is the counters. Okay, got to spell it correctly. That's the other thing you need to check is did you spell it the same way?
Well, see, what I do is it asks the program's going to ask you, okay, what do you want your character to be named?
Mm-hmm.
And then it saves that to the list under name
Mm-hmm.
as a
Okay,
keyword, and
gotcha.
then it just takes whatever under
First
name.
item
Yeah,
is
it just goes, oh, this is the name, so
okay.
your name, so it's going to be using that as.
Okay. So just as an idea, when you save it, use an alert so that you can see what name is being saved under, and when you retrieve it, also have an alert to tell you what name it is retrieved under, because if there's a mistake anywhere and those names do not match, one is empty or something like that, that would easily explain why you cannot retrieve anything, even though it's not empty. So anyway, just an idea of how to kind of step by step find out why it's not working.
Well, even
Okay.
with because it has the function right where you can get tags.
Mm-hmm.
It comes back with all the tags. It doesn't come back with anything.
Huh. Okay. So that means the store somehow did not work. Okay. So the focus would then be the store value part. Okay. So in this case, we have to make JSON out of the elements. So we just replicate that block. All right. So every time I increment any one of the counters, it will automatically save it into TinyDB. So as I can exit the app at any time, and when I re-enter the app or when we restart the app, it should have it should bring back all the counters. Okay. And do we still want the alert? It doesn't really hurt, but it does slow down the debugging. So I think we can get rid of the first one, at least disable the first one, because we already know that we got the index correctly. So we disable this one. This one we can just kind of keep showing it so that we know what the list looks like. Okay, that can be helpful.
Well, that'll be good actually because the last time we do it,
Yeah, we
we
know
get
it's
those numbers
working.
and go, all right, now let's see if it prints
Okay,
back the right
all
file.
right. So let's disable it because otherwise it takes time. Okay, so let's go ahead and build the APK again.
I got a phone and everything from a friend, and then it ends up not working.
Your phone or the app?
Friend, the phone.
The phone, the friend.
So I brought my Kindle today. Maybe you can help me figure out how to put it on my Kindle.
Okay.
I've been using the emulator this whole time.
Oh, okay.
Which doesn't work very well for saving files.
It's really small in terms of how much space it has. That
Like
can.
the one where we uploaded the JavaScript thing, I couldn't even get it to work with the emulator. I don't think it works.
Okay. Do you have you got your own laptop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a stupid thing. It only has one output, right? You gotta bring a dongle everywhere you go. I hate that word too. Dongle. Get my dongle. I'll show you. I love this computer except this. My $80 dongle. So you plug it in out there. It has this one has VGA, USB, and then USB-C. My one at home has HDMI. But I need this. The dongle is just Mac Apple Store. You're required to have one of these essentially. If I ever like
It translates to.
time is putting it. They
Yeah.
stopped making them. Like I think like they got too many complaints. But it's lighter than the Air.
Mm-hmm.
It's more powerful. I mean, it does have a lot of good features. This part is retarded though.
Yeah, well, it's just one dongle that you have to carry with you. You.
Expensive dongle.
Well, that's because it's an Apple product.
Well, and this dongle failed after a year, and I called them and I yelled at them, and they sent me a new one though.
If you go to AliExpress, you can probably get the same thing for $15.
They don't last as long. Like Apple products,
I know.
this stuff does last longer.
Yep.
I don't bother anymore. Like
Okay.
I used to get like shitty power bricks,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just not good.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so I'm gonna close the app now,
3,
like so,
1, 0.
and then we make sure that we don't have any. We X out everything in it. Okay. Close all. Okay, there we go. Now we restart it, and it brought everything back.
Huh.
Yep.
So I must be doing something wrong then.
Put a different.
Well, we don't know what is causing it, so we can help it. Yeah.
You can increment those right now and it saves
I just
Yeah. Yeah. So you can increment these, any way you want, and then we can back out of the application, and then we can make sure that we terminate everything, close all, so we know that it's not an earlier instance of the program running, and we restart and, remembered all the numbers.
So, are you able to create a different
You
image
are, I assume,
for each
asking
one
the
of those
person what the name of the
programs
character
you
is the
have?
second time, right?
Yes. So okay. So let's talk about the icon a little bit because I
That's
think,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
icon.
the icon. Yes.
I didn't do the right terminology. Icon. Thank
All
you
right.
for understanding that word.
That's okay. So if you want to create an icon, the first thing you need to do is to get a bitmap. And are you creating your own bitmap or are you going to use one that you download or somebody else has made
I
for you?
haven't started that because I couldn't.
You
I'm
haven't
not
started?
saving
Okay.
things. I
Okay.
just wondered if you can put a different image.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is about setting the icon of your app here. So if you want to set an icon, if you want to make one, there are several ways to do it. You can use Inkscape, which is really good if you like hand drawing stuff. So I mean, it's a great tool because whatever it makes is in SVG, which means it's infinitely scalable. So when your app goes really big, and you want to make a billboard out of your app, it will have really smooth curves and everything is good. Okay, it's not pixelated in any way. So Inkscape is good for that purpose. You can also use the GIMP. Okay, the GNU Image Manipulation Program, which is kind of like a Yes, it is called a GIMP. That is what it's called, the GIMP. So the GIMP is really, it's kind of like the poor man's version of Photoshop. It's very lightweight, doesn't chew up all the hard drive space that you have. It's free. It can even read Photoshop files. So it's kind of cool that way. It's not easy to use from the perspective of it is kind of complicated like Photoshop itself. You have layers and then you have all kinds of constructs. So if you're using the GIMP to create an image for your icon, you can do a lot of good stuff. The GIMP, yes, it is the GIMP.
How much are you grading on how our app looks?
Nothing. None of the points is based on your icon.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Functionality.
Good. Okay.
Good.
Why were you have a GIMP to help you?
So the other way to do it, for those of you who are kind of artistic on like physical media, is you can just draw it and then take a picture of that and then turn it into a bitmap.
Ask the
Okay.
GIMP to turn into a bitmap.
Yeah, the GIMP can turn it into a bitmap, and then the other thing the GIMP can do, you just cannot get over that part. Eh? Yeah. So the GIMP can also turn a particular color into quote unquote transparent, which is really good because otherwise your icon doesn't look right, because it doesn't seem to be floating, on top of the tray. So you can use the GIMP to deal with that also. It's really kind of useful for that purpose. So one of those ways is fine. Okay, whichever way seems to work best for you is that's what you want to do. Okay, so let's just say that we got a bitmap already. So once you have a bitmap already, then you can go back to App Inventor, go to the designer, and the property that you want to set is on the screen itself. So go to screen one. Only screen one has that property, and it is icon right here. And you can now set the icon to the file that you uploaded. So it can be a PNG, can be a JPG, can also be a GIF file. That will set the icon of your app. So when you build the APK again, then it will have that icon associated with it. So is that answering your question?
I watched the video again. Yes.
Okay. I cannot remember which day.
No, I meant the video you
Oh, you
put
mean
out.
this right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that this weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Wow, that is cool.
Yep. You do need to have your own icon if you want to make your app available from the Play Store.
That's what I thought.
Yep. Any other
I looked
questions?
at some like I don't know if anybody else has some apps like in their, like everybody can save books or projects. Man,
Yeah.
it made me feel better. I had a panic attack about my project, and then I was like, I'm gonna look at other people's.
Uh huh.
I felt better about mine.
Yeah, that's the App Inventor
There's some god awful things that people post.
gallery, right? That they call it the gallery.
I can't even believe people have the balls to post them. I'm like, why? It's horrible. Did I get a virus? Like, I don't know. Like, they're bad. If you
Well,
go to the popular page, it's fine. But if you're just like,
okay, where do I get to the gallery?
You
well,
go
I
to
mean, why
popular.
post it? Yeah. I'll type in recipe. You'll see. At least I know mine is like. It should be linked off the page.
Yeah, I think you can just go to the top.
If you just go to the top
page.
and go to where did I go? Is it under research? Gallery. Yeah, there's a gallery link when you log in.
Mm-hmm.
Top page right next to my projects. So go to create apps. Or yeah, up there. Now go all the way up, and there's a gallery to the right.
Oh, okay.
So I had a little fun with this, and so if you look at recipe, I think there's just it's easy recipe organizer. I think that's the one I tried, the fourth one.
This one.
Yeah, I think that's
Just look at the icon. Just look at the icon here.
Why do people post it?
Well, if you look at this, the name
know
of
if
the
it's
person who
good.
signed in, it's Drashman
This
085.
was just posted.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize.
Creation date is just
Maybe
sometime
I'm
last
Trash
week.
Man. Rename it Trash Man.
Yeah, and you can open it. This is good. I mean, you can at least look at the code of other
Well,
people.
it got me off my panic attack. I was like, okay, maybe I can do this.
So how are you able to look at their code?
Right there.
It brings it up.
Yeah, it just brings it up. Yep. I can't run it easily because I have the
Run it on
more
emulator.
I have the more obscure way
It
of
has,
starting
like,
it.
one recipe, I think,
Uh huh.
and if you put like breakfast, it doesn't work. It's just like,
Yeah. Well, if you just look at the blocks,
yeah, there you go.
that's it, right? I
No, there's
mean,
two screens.
there are two screens. There's another one. Oh, there are multiple screens. There are many screens, so it's work in progress. I mean, I did put my code into the gallery, like the JSON, the make JSON thing. So I just make a tiny little sample program and say, okay, give me a list, and this is how make JSON works. But it doesn't serve any purpose either, other than just saying that okay, I got a function that can reverse or decode JSON, right? So there are programs like that just for demonstration purposes. It doesn't really fulfill a particular purpose. Yeah, but this is great. I mean, for those of you who want to kind of check out what other people are doing, with their apps, you can look it up.
You want to feel better about yourself?
Well, just don't look up the app inventor of the month.
There's some like Tom Holland apps.
Huh?
There's a whole like list of Tom Holland apps, and I don't understand.
Tom Holland.
Yeah, if you were in the gallery, it was right next to the one you picked. Tom Holland and Spider-Man.
Oh,
I don't know what the deal is. I don't know. It's weird.
Means I'm running a joke with the gallery.
Yeah,
Like
it's
the
something.
community.
He's got like 30 apps of Tom Holland.
Okay, here's a.
Tom Holland
So
apps.
seventh grader wrote this.
Don't make me feel bad.
Hit the icons.
It was two of them, so it's okay.
What?
It was two of them. It was okay.
Yeah, this. Oh, here's a 12-year-old. How do you like this? This is a 12-year-old. Yep. And what is this one? Sneaks in a little bit of math.
Yeah, go ahead and pick one.
Adult inventor. Okay.
Inventor?
Yeah.
Oh.
Points to circles. This is from Germany.
Let's click
Yeah. This one?
And plot points on a graph to make a circle.
This is like YouTube for app inventor, right? I mean, you might get something like Justin Bieber doing something, but you might get something surprisingly good also.
Set three. Oh, is this just draws a circle for you?
I don't think so. I think it's more complex.
Put 3 points
Oh,
on
Jesus.
and it'll create a circle.
Oh, yeah. So any 3 points, that's a mathematical thing.
Don't open it.
Don't open it. Yeah, so if you draw any 3 points, it will calculate what is the radius and also where is the center of the circle, too, so that the circumference of the circle will go through all 3 points. It's kind of a math thing, as long as the 3 points are not exactly the same, there are no duplicate points. Yep. So are we good so far?
Great.
All right. Great. I like that. I like the contrasting elements of what you said versus what you meant. They say you guys know this double negative meaning a positive, right? There ain't no sunshine.
Know not what you talk about.
That's double negation meaning a positive, but there's also double positive meaning a negative, and you just used one. Something like yeah, yeah, right, yeah, right, double positive, but it actually means the negative.
Smell a new app.
All right, so I'm gonna stop the class now, and we're gonna move on to the lab. So if you want me to take a look, we can go
I'll be
take a
there
look
in
at the
10
lab.
minutes, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Any
Yeah.